The only team that got it right is the team with the once-in-a-generational engineering talent that is Adrian Newey.
Adrian Newey should be a flavor of Red Bull.
It's true.
Yikes.
He should have his own.
What would his flavor be?
drink.
I feel like that's like
It doesn't taste any different. The can is just more aerodynamic.
LOL. I like that. Yes. I'm Caroline.
And I'm Christina.
And this is Gravel Trap F1.
Guess what? Monaco was not boring this year.
Nope, it was pretty wet and wild.
That's right. And in today's formation lap, we'll discuss the tires F1 uses in wet weather.
And in the Grand Prix segment, we cover a story where $250,000 went missing on track during the 2004 Formula One race in Monaco.
At the checkered flag, Buck reads the news, and we give you our hot takes on some recent headlines.
Let's get into it.
Okie dokie, we just had Monaco, and we got a special treat this weekend. We got to see, I think, all 5 of the tires got run throughout the race.
Yeah, and Monaco I feel like is typically somewhat predictable these days because it's so much harder to pass in Monaco, and a lot of people have been calling it pretty boring, but I don't know about you, but I felt like this weekend's Monaco was anything but boring.
I will say, I did doze out for a certain portion of it, like that middle third. I was kind of just like, yeah, okay, they're trucking along. And then I heard them talk about like, oh, here comes the rain. And then I was awake, just like, boom, there, I'm staring, I'm waiting. And that downpour was actually like pretty intense. Like it came and it went, but when it was there, it was
heavy.
Significant.
Yeah, and you could see it on the track too because it was dry, and then I felt like they would go around a corner, and then the next time they came around the corner, it was soaking wet.
Before we go any further, like little round of applause for getting to see the helmet cams, like the little eye view, and seeing what the drivers see with the rain pelting against their visor. It's like so good to see. It adds so much context to why driving in the wet is challenging.
My goodness.
So enjoyed that. Like that was just a good one to see.
Talk to us about the tires. Tell us about these like wet tires that they were dealing with this weekend.
Right. So big difference between our dry tires and our wet tires is that the dry tires are called slicks because they do not have treads. So they look super, super smooth, and they do that so that way they actually have the most contact possible with the track. It gives them the highest amount of grip that way, which is fantastic. But the bad news, as we saw with this race this weekend, is that means the moment there's water, they're useless. Like they just slip, slide all over the place, spinning like ballerinas. And I feel like we also forget, at least I forget every single year, that Monaco has hills. Like there's a pretty significant elevation change like a number of times throughout the track, which you got such a good impression of this year as well because of the new camera angles. Like you got to see them actually changing that elevation a lot and going up and down. So that's where the wets come in. They have treads and they displace water. So it allows the track to get that dry line set up and you get grip, which the moment the teams put those inter tires on, you got to see like such a drastic difference within like a lap or two, I want to say. It did take a little bit of time to dry up that track, but it made a difference.
It did. Well, and I have a question that's more of a hypothetical because I think that they went over it after the race, but I didn't get a chance to see it. But Fernando Alonso took a long time to change onto the inters, and they had just pitted him for a fresh set of slicks. And I guess the big question that everybody had was, would he have been able to challenge for the win if he had changed to inters at that time? What do you think?
The numbers from what I've seen from other like data analysis accounts say that yes, if he had on that first pit stop, instead of switching over to another set of slicks, if he had immediately gone on to inters, he would have been ahead of Max at one point in the race. Whether that be, I'd have to go look it back at my timestamps, but he would have either after that pit stop been ahead of Max or after Max's pit stop been ahead of him. So he would have been in first towards the tail end of the race. Now, obviously Max was pulling out really, really good fast laps, and the Red Bull is a phenomenal car. So even with the difficulty of overtaking in Monaco, there's absolutely the possibility that Max still could have won the race and taken that position back. But yes, this is the closest Fernando has gotten to a win, and it would have also been just that little bit closer if that decision had been made a little bit sooner. There was the question of, is this rain going to be intense and long enough to warrant switching to the inters? Because again, they have such a different performance and conditions that they do well in compared to the slicks. And even the inters to the full wets, those are very drastically different conditions. And we heard the teams kind of debating about it, and thankfully only one car went onto the full wets, I believe, and it was towards like the back of the field as well.
I think it was Sergio. They put Sergio on Perez on the full wets. And essentially at that point, by the time they were putting him on the full wets, they were just using Checo as a data point for Max to figure out what they should do for Max.
I'm a little disappointed in that we did only get to see one person on the wets. And it's because we had the new wets this weekend. We were supposed to get them at Imola last weekend. Did not. But
for all the right reasons.
And my big hope, for all the right reasons, absolutely. But the new wets, I was really, really hoping that it would actually be a change to them displacing less water. Because currently, the intermediate tires displace 30 liters of water per tire per second at 300 kilometers per hour.
Wow.
I believe that's right. If I'm wrong, sorry. And then the full wets are 85 liters displacement.
Oh my gosh.
Like
per tire.
Per tire. So like, I wish I had my Nalgene right here, right now with me, but you imagine the like 1 liter of water bottles, 30 of that per tire for the intermediates, 85 of those per tires for the full wets. Like that is a butt ton of water. And anytime we go to use the full wets, 95% of the time it's in conditions that are too wet to race in. So it's like you really do need to fully change the design of the wet tires for the conditions that are like 1 step above the inters and like 2 steps below what you currently have them designed for. But instead, the new wets are designed for performance differences, whatever that means, and to not need tire blankets. Which, I mean, to make the switch over, start making that switch over to all of the tires not needing blankets, that makes sense because typically you're racing in cooler conditions the moment there's water on the track. So yes, see how it goes with the full wets, that makes sense. But to not reevaluate how much water is being displaced seems a little silly to me.
Yeah, but if their ultimate goal is to keep the race going, I would see their desire to have it displace as much water as possible because in the end they don't really want to stop a session. They want to keep racing because that's how you make money in the end. But for the safety of the drivers, I definitely see your point of, you know, if it's too wet to be racing, then don't solve your problem with tires. Solve your problem by keeping everybody alive and postponing. So,
yeah. Well, the other thing that I was kind of thinking about today as well as I was like thinking about this episode was that we have 6 different types of slicks, but we only have 2 tires for the wet conditions. Like that ratio seems really off to me because they acknowledge, okay, each racetrack is so distinct that Pirelli evaluates and decides which dry tires are most suitable. And you're telling me that the tracks, when they are wet, don't sometimes have different conditions, wet track to wet track? And that it's going to be a one-size-fits-all for their intermediates and wets?
That's a very good point. It's a very good point.
That seems very weird to me.
Yeah,
like,
I agree.
Expand your wet range.
At least add one more so that then you have 3 options. Because I feel like even the jump from 2 to 3 gives you some variety to work with. But
it really would.
Yeah, because that's the other thing is when rain falls, it falls at varying levels, varying degrees, varying amounts of heaviness. So if it's a lighter rain, you might want the soft equivalent, right, of the wet tire versus if it's a very, very heavy rain, you want to have the option between like a medium or a hard
Exactly.
level.
Yeah. And I mean, even when we talk about this all the time about Japan and how it's built on the rice paddy field.
Oh my gosh, don't even
You
get me
get
started.
those-
Our listeners know. They know how I feel about it.
Exactly. But then we're going to Canada in 3 weeks? And again, high potential for rain. It's on an island. It has a water in the middle of it and all around it. So that creates, again, different soil conditions for like overland flow and drainage. So the tracks just have different conditions that they're dealing with. Give us more wet tires. That's
the
a
answer.
hill I'm going to choose to die on now. Pirelli should design more wet tires. Give us more.
I agree. I agree. If they're going to be developing more slicks, then they should also be developing more wets, period.
What color would we give them?
Ooh, we need some pink in there. There's no pink.
Or purple. I feel like purple is like that cool water shade as well.
For starters, I want to apologize to our listeners because I am feeling a bit under the weather. So if I am coming across as a bit downplayed, it's not on purpose. I feel like I'm going to die. So bear with me, listeners. But for today's Grand Prix segment, we're going to be taking us obviously to Monaco, but to Monaco back in 2004. And I want to tangent by saying we all know that Brad Pitt's going to be making some appearances this season. So we're not going to get into that today because that doesn't have anything to do with Monaco. But speaking of Hollywood making its presence known in Monaco and in Formula One, back in 2004, the Jaguar racing team was competing. And I feel like it's worth noting that Jaguar Racing at the time was owned by Ford. They were going to the Monaco Grand Prix, and it was really important for them to bring in some good PR because the team was relatively new and they had come in 7th in the last 2 Constructors' Championships, which, if you don't know, that's not very good. They only place 1 through 10 in Constructors. And so to come in 7th is not the best. So there was a lot of pressure from Ford for them to do really well and to get some good PR. So the answer that they came up with was to partner with the promotion of a new movie that was coming out at the time called Ocean's 12, which for those of you that don't know anything about the Ocean's movies, this was a really big heist style movie starring Brad Pitt, George Clooney, and Matt Damon. If you don't know who they are, use Google. I'm not going to go into it. Go look them up. So go get out of the rock you've been living under and go find a Google search and look them up. But in order to fit with the themes of luxury that come with Monaco, they could have done a lot of things, honestly. They could have had an Ocean's 12 boat. They could have made a livery about Ocean's 12. I feel like they could have done a lot of things.
Smarter things.
Before they did what they ended up going with, yes. But instead, what they did was they called their friends over at the Steinmetz Group, which the Steinmetz Group is like a big jewelry. They own a lot of jewelry and jewelers and gemstones. And I feel like Christina would know the official name for what this group would be in charge of. But anyways, they had a lot of rocks. And so they called the Steinmetz Group and said, hey.
Don't call them rocks! That's like the worst thing you could call them. All the gemologists are going to be after you.
Gemologists, I'm sorry. They had
gems and precious stones.
Many gems, many precious stones, many options. And so what they did was they brought 5, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, 5 diamonds, each valued at around $250,000 each.
What?
And instead of, and again, okay, let's just go with them. Let's just say, hey, we're bringing in all of these gemstones. I won't call them rocks anymore. These gemstones. And we're going to put them on display. Maybe even like, you know, in the helmet or something. You know, like I could see it like being on a display helmet or being on a something. But they said, no, we're going to go one step further. You know the nose of the car at the very front? We're going to put it in the nose so that it's on display.
They gave it a stud.
They did. They really did. They gave it a little nose piercing on these
Oh my gosh.
on these Formula One cars. And I mean, I just wish I could have been in like the debrief with the drivers when they told them, hey, your cars this weekend are going to be $250,000 more expensive than they normally are. So if the pressure wasn't high enough, here's some more pressure. And also at the track where it has really tight turns, really narrow corners, and very, very, very little margin for error. And they were like, here, let's put these precious gemstones on the nose of your car. So one of the drivers for Jaguar Racing, Christian Klein, he actually crashed in the Thursday practice session that they had that week.
Mhm.
And everybody was so scared, but he damaged the back of the car. So the gemstone was fine. This was the other thing. Like, okay, put them in there for the photo opportunity and then take them out when they're actually racing. But they said, no, we're going to keep them in there while they're racing as well. Which I was like, wow, the amount of confidence they had to have to do this.
Also, there's so many look-alike gems that you could have used to have like a dummy on display just for the sparkle of it. But then like just swap out the fitting. Like also, for anybody who's new to the sport and confused when Caroline said the practice on Thursday, Monaco used to have their first practice sessions on Thursday because it's a national holiday, Ascension Day, on the Friday sometimes. They don't do that anymore, but they used to. So not a mistake, just weird piece of history.
Yes. But I had the thought of what you were talking about, Christina, about putting in a fake for the sake of the actual racing. They asked him about it. They actually asked the guy who was in charge of the Steinmetz group, who provided the diamonds. They asked him, like, why didn't you just put fake ones in the cars that would be lookalikes? And he said it would be more embarrassing for them to find out that they had put fake diamonds than it would be to risk losing real ones. And I said, I said to myself, oh, that's what he said. And I thought to myself, tell me you're too rich without telling me you're too rich. Like, goodness gracious. I would be like, no, I'd be holding on to that, which I don't think I'm the only person that thought that, because on the first lap of the race on Sunday, lap 1, Christian Klein crashed again, this time with the front of the car. And the front wing and the nose took the majority of the damage, and the diamond was lost, never to be found again to this day.
Wait.
Unfound.
How physically, like, how big of a diamond are we talking?
Big.
Like,
they call it button size. Like, they referred to it as having been button sized. I mean, like, I mean, it's like bigger than your like the front, like your thumb. Like when you think of like your from the knuckle in your thumb to like the tip of your thumb, bigger than that.
Okay.
I'm thinking like eyeball size. Like it's big.
Like a chonky chonk.
It was
Pink
big.
Panther kind of a thing?
Yeah, it was an emerald cut
nice.
diamond. Fitted in the front, but gone now, never to be found again. There were many conspiracies, obviously, because it's also in promoting a heist movie. I'm like, you can't make this up. I mean, it went missing in the promotion of a heist movie. And they said it was like some of the best PR they could have ever asked for. I said, that's some of the most expensive PR you could have ever asked for, but okay. But yeah, there's a lot of theories, a lot of conspiracy theories. My favorite one is that one of the marshals was just like sweeping up and thought that it would be a nice raise. But we have a lot of respect for the marshals, so I don't think that one's true. But I mean, I would think that the temptation would be high. And there's another conspiracy that it ended up in one of the drains and like is somewhere out in the ocean, and Ariel can find it. But we'll see.
Oh my gosh. Man, okay. Here's the other thing that gets to me is that diamonds have they're chonky things, especially that big. Like they're the top of the hardness scale that gemologists use.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're 10 out of 10. So if someone's in an accident and that diamond goes flying and schwacks somebody in the head, that also seems like a huge safety concern. Why are you allowing this like maimable piece of debris essentially to be attached to a car?
Yeah.
No.
Well, and also apparently like the FIA and some of the teams got involved too, because you have certain specs of the car that are cleared beforehand, right? That your car has to be and fit a certain body style, et cetera, livery throughout the whole season. And when they announced that they were going to be doing this, they had to go, I mean, they had to work so hard just to even get this to be a thing for them to then lose it. And I don't know, I felt kind of bad for Christian Klein because I was like, look, he crashed twice with this diamond in the car. Like, clearly was not the move. So yeah, that was the big diamond heist of 2004.
Caroline, I've looked up some information as you were talking there. I wanted
Hit me.
to compare some things. So, firstly, the cost of a F1 engine, current V6, roughly $10 million.
Nice.
The steering wheel, about $50,000.
Yeah, they're
The
expensive.
gearbox, $350,000 for a gearbox. So Sergio Perez this weekend lost a diamond to Monaco again. Essentially, like I don't. They lose. I'm saying they lose gearboxes, not infrequently. So $250,000 extra on the car might. I don't know if it was that much of a sticker shock for the teams. I agree with Christina's thing about the projectile capability of that thing.
But also the value of a gearbox when it's not working, the value goes down.
Right.
Whereas the value of that diamond does not change whether it is on the car or off the car. It is still a $250,000 diamond. All right, so for today's checkered flag segment, Buck is going to hit us with some headlines that Christina and I have not seen previous to now. I mean, you're getting live reactions. So I'm prefacing it with that because I have no idea what we're about to talk about.
Ironically, we're going to talk about The Little Mermaid.
Oh my gosh, yay.
No, I picked up some headlines from the recent news in the last week or so, and I'll include those links in the episode description so our listeners can read through the whole article. We're not going to read line for line the entire article for everybody. The first one is titled, F1 is a Meritocracy. Wolf, as in Toto, against any restrictions to be put on rampant Red Bull. He said, if we start putting in a balance of performance, we will ruin this sport. The best driver in the best car spending the same amount of money should win the championship, and if you break the rules in either, you should be heavily penalized, but only then, not for doing a good job. End quote.
Such a class act, Toto Wolff, man. I've got a lot of respect for him because when you're struggling to meet the power and performance that the leaders have this year, it would be so easy to advocate to slow them down. But I feel like a true competitor accepts the challenge. And I think that that's what Toto is saying. He's saying, no, if you're winning fairly and you're destroying fairly, then why would you curb that? Because I think he put himself, he's been in that seat before. And so I commend it. I commend it because that was a test. That was a test to Toto of you can handle winning, but can you handle losing the way everybody else has been losing to you for a long time? Class act, Toto. 10 out of 10.
Completely agree. Like, you shouldn't be stunting the team that got it right. That being said, if the regulations are written as they are, that the only team that got it right is the team with the once in a generational engineering talent that is Adrian Newey, that's also a problem. Like, we should probably acknowledge that there is probably a better way to write the regulations that would have kept everybody more in line. Because right now, it's not just that Red Bull is doing well, it's that all the other teams are also struggling. And that's the bigger problem I have with it, is that you're looking at all the other teams and kind of just being like, you guys just don't get it. It's not even like, oh, you guys have a decent baseline and are like improving, just not as quickly as Red Bull. It's like, no, you guys are actually like struggling to even comprehend what to do with these regulations. So in that aspect, it's kind of like, I understand maybe adding regulations to help other teams catch up, but not to pull Red Bull back. Like, they understood the assignment.
Adrian Newey should be a flavor of Red Bull.
It's true.
Yikes.
He should have his own.
What would his flavor be? I feel like that's like
As long as it's not like the original one. The original one, I'm sorry, but that thing is not good.
Okay.
It doesn't taste any different. The can is just more aerodynamic.
LOL. I like that. Yes. All right. Hit us with the next one.
The next one is a kind of an editorial piece from divebomb.com, written by a Lewis Rundle. This is just a couple days ago. Headline is Formula One Stop. Is limited strategy to blame for F1's boring start to 2023? In summation, due to the current construction of Pirelli tires, it seems there isn't enough of a pace differential between compounds and tire age for a new set to be worth the time lost through pitting. And so the teams are sticking to their boring one-stop strategies.
I don't know. I feel like we've seen some high tire deg this year, just not from the Red Bull.
The bigger issue I see is not necessarily that the races are boring because of strategy. I think that there is a lot to watch. I think if you're going to criticize something, you should probably also wonder, what are we being shown by broadcasters? To redirect a little bit, what I personally find most annoying is that we get access to onboards now.
Mm-hmm.
All of the onboards if we want. So you can actually see if the broadcasters are missing action. So a lot of the times, I don't think that it's necessarily that we're getting boring racing. I think a lot of the times it's that broadcasters aren't making the best choices and you're losing out on a lot of things happening.
Like in Miami.
Yes. I think that's a huge part of it. But, could you add another element back to make strategy more complex and to wonder, when is somebody going to pit? Probably. But Formula One is Formula One because it's a constructors championship, because it's about the performance of these individual cars. And so for me personally, that's what I find most interesting. That's what I find most interesting and engaging, is that you're watching the different performance of a whole bunch of different cars. And I think it's not to be flippant or just like, are you sure you like Formula One? But are you sure you like Formula One? To some of these people, like, if you want series that are more dependent on pit stops and strategies to make their racing interesting, there are other series you can watch. But what makes Formula One special is that it's about the design of the cars.
Yeah. And I mean, you can find a lot of things to complain about and that are the cause or the reason to see this season as a somewhat of a snooze fest, because we're not seeing a real battle for P1 in the Drivers' Championship or even really in the Constructors' Championship. But I definitely don't think it's the tires' fault. Like, I don't think that it's a lack of... Pirelli is not at fault for me. I love Pirelli. I am a big Pirelli fan. So I will not speak against Pirelli. I think Pirelli's doing a great job. The only request we have is maybe some more wet tires. Please, Pirelli. We love you. Goodbye.
I would like to see them make gapped selections on the tires, like C5, C3, and C1.
Oh,
like they did that last year. There was at least one race I remember where there was a gap between the numbers, and they actually went pretty wide with one of the choices. And I was like, "That's interesting."
It was Imola. I think it was one of the recent ones. Yeah. And last thought: no one racing series can be absolutely everything. They have to make choices of what do we emphasize, where do we get our excitement from. So, if Formula One chooses to not do that through forced pitting and strategies more so than they already are, I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
There's other racing series to watch for different things. Yeah. That's what makes variety great. Just watch more racing, guys.
And that's what makes racing great, is that you can watch a different series and get a different thing. And period. End of story. Next,
our final headline. Ooh. Alfa Romeo to join HAAS in 2024 F1 title sponsorship deal.
Oh, yeah.
What?
So it is been reported. I don't know if this has been confirmed this hasn't been confirmed by the teams as of yet, but an inside source gave racingnews365.com information that Alfa Romeo will be parting ways with Sauber, who is the team that they currently sponsor.
End of this year,
and sponsoring HAAS. So I don't know what their naming convention will be. It'll be Alfa Romeo Haas or just Alfa Romeo. I doubt Gene Haas would give up, the name on his car. I'm curious as to what happens to Sauber. Are they just going to be called Sauber again, or whatever their partner they get for 1 year? Because they're going to be
2 years.
2 years of not having Alpha before Audi comes in.
Yeah.
Is Audi going to give them a title sponsorship for 2 years? So will they be Audi Sauber for 2 years before they're just Audi?
That would be cool. I would be on board with that.
No, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Audi chose to do, because they are already kind of doing that phases of taking over and starting to become involved with the team.
More involved.
They have stake. Yeah, they have stakes in it right now. So they have money in the team already. They have brought over Andrea Seidel. Which Andrea? That one? Okay.
Yeah.
They've already brought him in to start his CEO responsibilities. So they're already starting the transition. It wouldn't surprise me if they were just like, you know what? Let's start the naming now and not just have those 2 random years of just Sauber. That wouldn't surprise me at all. But yeah, Haas switching from MoneyGram to Alfa Romeo Haas would be, I'd like it better. It sounds, MoneyGram Haas just sounds, I don't know. I don't love the name MoneyGram. Like it's very descriptive. It is what it is. But I do enjoy when teams have names that have like racing history behind them or intention as opposed to just a brand.
Does it take away from Haas's status as an American team if they have an Italian car maker sponsor? Does that's the thing I bump on.
Yeah, I think so, because you have plenty of American car companies that could be backing it. And my biggest take on this is that Haas cannot hold down a title sponsor. I feel like every season we are seeing a new title sponsor for them. So I'm just kind of like, meh, it'll be Alfa Romeo next year, but we'll see who it is in 2025. We don't really know. Like no shade towards Haas, but it's just the truth. But I will say, the one sponsorship that I'm the most excited about for them was Chipotle. I can get behind that one.
All right. Well, those are the headlines. Thanks for giving me your hot takes on those.
Of course.
On that sizzling news there. As I said, the links to those articles will be in the description of this podcast down below.
Also, the relief is still ongoing in Imola. That has not ended just because we are no longer racing there this year. So if you want to go and give relief to the relief fund, we will also put that in the description of this podcast episode so that we can further help our Italian brothers and sisters.
And that's our episode for the post-Monaco week, and we've had a fantastic time. Thank you for listening, and we hope to have you all listening and joining us again next week. You can find us on all of our social media pages, as per usual, Graveltrap F1, and I'm Christina. That's Caroline.
And I'm Caroline. Meow.
Meow.
See you next time on the Little Mermaid recap.
Next time, do they make her tail the proper shade of green?
I'm dead.